won 97 races in SCCA, IMSA, and Trans Am racing. You are wondering what the future will be. I can tell you what it'll be. You're destroying vintage and historic cars by inflating the prices beyond belief. But if there's a young person out there that actually cares about motorsports history, Corvette, General Motors, endurance racing, IMSA, etc., and you want somewhere to start, how about $5,000? Just so long as these older collectors that don't do anything for the future never get to touch it. What's up, people? So I get a lot of questions and comments actually about the mysterious black car up in the corner. Well, it is actually a very special greenwood bodied Corvette and one of the most winning Corvettes in American road racing history. So let's go take a look at it. Now, the interesting thing about this car that I want to bring up, it's Genius Garages. And most recently, an incredibly famous person in terms of their last name with a big Corvette collection inquired about potentially buying it. And I wasn't thinking of selling it. I was just keeping it around to restore. And thought about it, and it hit me. If a person like that bought this car, it would get restored and look pretty, and it would sit in some stupid collection and never see the light of day again, probably, never get driven, matter in no way to the future, except for some people to come by and sip coffee and eat donuts or cocktails and think somebody's fancy because they have a bunch of cars. So what I want to do about this is, let's talk about the history, but also we will sell it with a major caveat. It can only be sold to a young person who will restore it and not to anybody else. So stick around if you're interested in this. The other thing I'm going to do is I want to talk about how the nature of the automotive industry for restoration, Concours World, vintage racing, and car collecting is genuinely destroying classic and vintage cars for the future. So this car, with no further ado, this is the Corvette known as Sluggy. Yeah, it actually has a name. It was owned and driven by a guy named William Wessel, who went by Bill or Snoopy. If you look up there on the walls, those are the original doors. Look up on the walls. You see the doors there in blue? Those are from the original car, which is a 1969 Corvette chassis. And as you can see, they're hand-painted Snoopy 69 BP, and it's got the Winston GT. And if you look at that one over there, it's still got the IMSA GT stickers on it. But this car started racing in the mid-70s, actually like 73, 74, and in its entire history until the early 2000s, won 97 races in SCCA, IMSA, and Trans Am racing. That's just outstanding and incredible. I mean, the thing raced for 30 years, and that's why it needs to be restored, of course. And what's neat, so Snoopy, as he went by, he actually passed away a few years back, and Genius Garage bought the car directly from him. Because more interestingly, if you look over there at the yellow car, that was the Riggins chassis car that was bodied with the C4 Corvette in 1989-ish, 1988. It was owned by Carl Keck. And you can look over here again. Anyway, so Snoopy, or Bill, actually drove that car once or twice, and he got word that we had restored it, and Genius Garage was being really successful with it in vintage racing. I was really impressed by everything we had done. And of course, he talked about this, because he was never going to get to restoring it. And after talking with him for a long time, he finally chose to sell it to Genius Garage. Now, what's happened since that time, as a note, we've gotten a lot of other cars, a lot of other amazing projects, airplanes, the like, and build everything going on. And because this is a large restoration project, we got part of the way along the way with Genius Garage, but since Genius Garage is a little bit more involved with engineering and the teamwork and the machining and all that, with just a little bit of the restoration aspect, it was too big of a project in terms of just restoration to make the most sense for the students in their curriculum. So anyway, going back to this car, it's a 1969 Corvette that he bought as a normal street car in 1972. In fact, I've got his original title from 1972 still for it. And then after a year or two of driving on the street, he decided he wanted to go road racing. Well, the guy totally fell in love with it and was an absolute American madman. Old school, beat crap with a hammer, drive the wheels off of it. Hey, we lost the brakes at Daytona going 200 miles an hour, hee-haw kind of a guy, you know what I mean? So he fell in love with it, and actually the car was painted old blue on the front, because kind of like the big Corvette Greenwood cars back at the time. Well, he was down in Florida kind of outside of Orlando is where he lived, and he had his own body shop, Snoopy's Body Shop. And he built a lot of custom Corvettes back in the day, but this was his car, his pride and joy, right? And he ended up making friends with actually the Greenwood guys and their shop. So as he was building his race car and moving up, they would sell him and help him through like the back door with parts from Greenwood's shop. So as an example, in the later 70s, this particular Greenwood body is actually rather unique because it's literally the exact same body that came off of John Paul's IMSA car, which you can see was for sale out at Canepa's a while back ago in kind of a light blue and yellow livery. The nose off of this was allegedly, he's telling me, was from one of their Talladega speed record cars, and when they were done with it, he got the chin spoiler to go on his car. And of course, there's loads of stories about the hood blowing off at Daytona and everything like that, so it had a bunch of different hoods, and we've even got a mold for hoods in the back and all. But it's just an amazing, fabulous car that won so many races. Now, the big Greenwood C3 Corvettes that we're more familiar with are the ones that were roadster and had the hardtop put on, whereas this one, which I believe was called the Turbo, has the later one that has the smooth, teardrop sort of glass in the back, even though it'd be polycarbonate. And it's a little more svelte, a little more narrower. Now, places like ACI up in the Toledo area and maybe Eckler's back in the day for street cars would sell the turbo fenders, which was a, not bolt-on, but you cut your fenders on your street car and you glue them on the side and you have doors and all. This is not that. This was one of the one-offs from the racing mold, single piece. So it's rather special bodywork. It's really neat there. And the guy just drove it and drove it and drove it. When he first had this bodywork on, it was painted a beautiful light metallic blue, and they were Cadillac colors of the time and had gold-looking vector wheels. And that's when he first got going. It had a bit of a different wing, kind of like the turbo wing before it had that rear end on it. And later, I'm trying to remember the exact livery changes, so to speak. There was one time when he raced Trans Am race, it was all white. So it went from the original bodywork to 1969 was kind of painted old blue and hand lettered, which the two doors remain on the wall from that. And then of course it had this body and was painted with the light blue Cadillac colors and was raced for a long time with that. It was really pretty. Then I think it got repainted white and it raced in a Trans Am race. And then a good number of years later, and this is getting towards like the late 80s, early 90s, the white car I think evolved to be black at the bottom, and it had a big silver and red stripe on the side that went up. It was a really pretty car. And then it was later in like the late 90s, I'm thinking, he just painted the whole thing black as it sits today. And when my wife and I went down there to pick it up from him, it was just buried, outside the overhang of what left of his old shop outside of Orlando. And it just covered in dust, filthy mess, and there were some parts to be like archaeology. So we got them all out, and I still remember this one guy. They like paid $20 to help us like drag it out. It took forever. I've never seen so many scars in all my life. The dude was shot 14 times and survived. He had just like round scars all over himself. It's the crazy days. So this car went through all that amazing history. I've got a little bit of DVD on it, and it was priceless because he had all the old trophies. I got pictures of in his house, and all these crazy stories of like the 70s and 80s in IMSA and like racing back in the day when it was like beer and drugs and hookers. I mean, that's what it was back then. I'm sorry, don't hate me. These guys were crazy back then. And he's like, yeah, man, I used to have more pictures and logbooks on the car, but I was dating a stripper in like the middle 1980s, and I came home once and she got all pissed off, and I came home and all my stuff was on fire in the yard. So I grabbed what I could. And some of the logbooks are actually still have burn marks from that time. So that was old Bill. But nice guy. He passed away a few years back, and that was sad because it was at that time that he was really nice and worked talking to the students at Genius Garage online. And when he passed away, it kind of just lost steam. So that was sad, but he was a really nice guy. The car was really well known. When Taylor and I got it from him, we immediately went to the classic Daytona 24 Hours, which is Brian Redmond's event with the HSR, real nice event. And we got it out and just showed it off at the infield. It was kind of neat, parked it there, and there were a number of people that came by and goes, oh my God, I remember this car. So anyway, so what was I talking about early on at how the nature of all these big things happening in the car world are destroying vintage cars? All right, I'm gonna come down here and sit down so I don't look like a lunatic standing on a table. So this car can either sit around until we get around to restoring it and doing something with it for Genius Garage, and that's fine. But quite frankly, we could use the space. But I'm going to try to say this as succinctly as I possibly can, because for my entire life, I was the youngest person interested in vintage cars and historic racing histories and building them and racing them and taking them to concours. And that entire time, I have watched and observed how that entire world works. The cliques, the social circles, the magazines relating from like sports car marketplace to vintage racing, racer, you name it, the concours world, how the prices fluctuate, where they go, and what they're affected by. And I would say in the last 10 years especially, and also the advent and the nature of all the big auctions. So the most succinct way I can possibly put this is all of those things have come together and effectively have, in a way, gentrified old cars. They've become something to talk about as prestige just to own them and own lots of them and own pretty ones. And then everybody decides they're worth so much money that nobody does anything with them anymore. They're afraid to get a rock chip. They're afraid to hurt it. They're afraid to have an accident and have to fix it because you'll hurt the history. And the prices get inflated. I remember when I was working as a part-time Ferrari mechanic in college, and this was like 2004, 2005, every year a new Ferrari model would double in price within like a month or two. And that was when I realized this was being effectively orchestrated by the people who can make it happen. And everybody says, Casey, it's supply and demand. No, it's not. It wasn't that many years ago that certain cars were a fifth or a tenth of the value that they are right now. And then when you see cars be worth a ton of money and all of a sudden you see a ton of them on the marketplace, yeah, they're not actually worth that much money, and the people that have them are hoping to get something out of it. It's stupid and it's disgusting. And I'm really getting tired, frankly, of these bigwigs. I own an insurance company, hooray! I own an auction company, I own a marketplace magazine. You are wondering what the future will be. I can tell you what it'll be. You're destroying vintage and historic cars by inflating the prices beyond belief. Because the people who collect them and can afford to have them right now aren't doing that much with them. And then when they die, no one's going to care because it never got shared and all of those things were unattainable. And the thing that I hate the most right now is when I read a magazine out there and they're like, what's the next hot new collector car? What about a 944? Sure to double in price in the next year. Screw you. They don't need to double in price. Stop inflating the prices of cars. Stop ruining the future of vintage cars for young people, because young people are already starting to not care. And you all don't realize the world is moving on. So here's what I'm going to say. I said enough. Yeah, I'm kind of mad at it because I like vintage and historic cars and I see what's going on and I'm tired of you people inflating the prices, and I think it's kind of disgusting. When I see a guy with 100 cars in a collection, even if it's 20 cars in a collection, and they're all the same thing, they're just inflating the prices, and what's worse, freaking private equity guys or wealth managers, they can get a cheap loan or line of credit, and they see cars being inflated at a higher rate, so they just get a bunch of lines of credit to buy all these cars and help inflate the prices with the ongoing manipulative thing of the nature of the auctions, which isn't always at face value, and the few couple of magazines that people are actually paying attention to. It's horrible. They're destroying the future. So here's what I'm going to say. This car, one of the most winning Corvettes around. None of you can have it. It can sit and rot for the rest of history for all I care. Just so long as these older collectors that don't do anything for the future never get to touch it. No auction, I don't care. And it's time for other people who have special cars that actually care about the future to stop supporting that. Stop selling out. Because by selling out and making all these cars untouchable, you are destroying their future. But I will sell it on one occasion. If there's a young person out there, probably the age of 25 or less, who doesn't come from money or the car world and has no direct connections to that they, with their family or whatnot, can restore it reasonably and put together a business plan to do that and what they're going to do with it because they actually like vintage cars and want a shot, I'll sell to you for $5,000. That's what Bill would have wanted. He didn't want his stupid old fat crony friends to have it because it's just going to sit there and not do anything. And he sure as heck wouldn't want these gentrified, elitist, classist, vintage car people to have it because the car wouldn't do anything. Bill was a racer. He was rough around the edges, but he actually gave a crap about young people. And right now, we're not getting to this anytime soon. So, if a young person out there can do it, and it's not about money for you, because I'm going to have a clause that you can't sell it after it's restored for a minimum of 5 years. And the first person you have to sell it to is here. But if there's a young person out there that actually cares about motorsports history, Corvette, General Motors, endurance racing, IMSA, etc., and you want somewhere to start, how about $5,000? That seems kind of an old school way to do it. There's no engine and transmission. You're going to have to learn to fabricate. You might even have to learn how to weld and do some body work. But it's well worth it. And at least by doing this, I get to make a small step, more so than just doing Genius Garage, to actually make vintage cars matter for the future. Because I don't care how glamorous all these things are that are going on and how much money everybody thinks these cars are worth. All that's doing is destroying the future. And I don't like it. So, even if nobody buys it out there and I just make a bunch of people mad right now, and I probably made at least 3 billionaires and 5 centimillionaires really mad at me. Who cares? At least we can do something better for the future. And I hope maybe this inspires some other people out there to realize that these are just material things. And even though they might have history, history is nothing more than stories for people that went out and did something with them. So if you're not going out and making more history for your cars, you don't deserve to have it. If it's only about money and investment, you don't deserve to have it. So I don't really know how to end this any other way, but Bill's a nice guy, good stories, neat car, and I hope some young person does something with it. And even if this doesn't work out and nobody buys it, that's fine. I'll just keep it around and we'll store it some other time. And that's it. And no, I'm not going to sell it to any YouTubers either. There's got to be some young person out there that can carry the torch. But that's all I got, guys. Share it if you like. And I don't know, this will probably make some old Corvette people mad. Some rich guys. But I really don't care, because if it makes them mad, they're probably not doing anything for the future anyway. Share it, like, comment, and please subscribe. See you guys next time.